The first gunshot echoed through the mall like a slammed door. People stopped moving, heads turned. Somewhere a baby started crying. Near the food court, a man in a black hoodie pushed through the crowd. One hand stayed hidden in his sleeve. His pace was fast, too fast for just walking. In front of him stood a little girl in a yellow dress with white flowers. She was holding a pink ice cream cone, her mouth open, confused. She looked small against the wide, shiny tile floor. Her mother wasn't there. Ryan Hayes had just stepped out of the cell phone store with a bag of clearance jeans. He wore a faded baseball cap, his head slightly down. He liked being unnoticed, but he saw the girl and he saw the man coming toward her. Ryan's body reacted before he could think. He moved fast, cutting through the people who were still frozen in place. He was almost to her when the second gunshot went off. It was loud and close. Ryan hit the girl with his shoulder, wrapping her up and taking her to the ground. Her ice cream splattered across the tile. A sharp pain tore through his right arm. He held her tight. She was shaking but not hurt. The man in the hoodie turned and ran. Mall security rushed over. "Sir, stay down!" One of them shouted into a radio, calling for help. Ryan kept his eyes on the girl. "You okay, kid?" She nodded, her face pale. Sirens were already in the distance. People shouted. Somewhere a tray of food hit the floor. Then a woman ran in tall, dressed in a dark skirt and blazer, her heels clicking hard on the tile. She dropped to her knees, pulling the girl into her arms. "Sophie, oh my God." She held her tight, checking her over for injuries. Then her eyes found Ryan. Her gaze froze on the blood soaking through his shirt. Her expression shifted from panic to something cooler, more calculating. This wasn't just a mother. This was someone used to assessing situations, managing crises. The woman clutched her daughter while taking Ryan's measure with eyes that missed nothing. For 3 minutes, everything blurred. Security radios, the rush of footsteps. But the woman's eyes stayed locked on his. She didn't know him, but in that moment something passed between them. Recognition without understanding. She saw him. Really saw him, perhaps for the first time in years. Ryan sat in the back of the ambulance, his arm wrapped tight in white gauze. The EMT had asked if he wanted to go to the hospital, but he said no. He couldn't afford another bill. At 34, Ryan lived a quiet life. He worked nights stocking shelves at a warehouse on the edge of town. He had a small 2-bedroom apartment where his 8-year-old son Aiden slept in the room with the only window that got morning light. Ryan didn't complain much, but when people saw him, old Gene's calloused hands, they didn't expect much from him either. That was fine with him most of the time. The woman from the mall stood a few feet away now, holding her daughter. Her name was Victoria Bennett. You could tell by her voice when she spoke to the police. Calm, firm, used to being in control. She wore clothes that cost more than Ryan made in a week. People listened when she talked. Victoria was the CEO of Horizon Innovations, a growing tech company in the city. Everyone here seemed to know her name. She had a way of making the officer step aside without raising her voice. The man in the hoodie was still out there, and the mall was locked down. Victoria's focus stayed on her daughter, but every so often her eyes slid back to Ryan. Not warm, not cold, just measuring, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle he represented. The police took statements. Ryan's was short. He told them what he saw, what he did. One officer barely looked up from his clipboard. "So you just happened to be there?" he asked, his tone flat. "Yeah, just walking by." The officer wrote something down but didn't thank him. Didn't even meet his eyes. It wasn't the first time Ryan had felt invisible. People in uniforms usually treated him like trouble waiting to happen, especially since his years in the Marines didn't show in his clothes, only in the way he noticed things others didn't. Nearby, a man in a gray suit whispered something to Victoria. He was her company's head of security. His name was Dominic. His job was to protect her and her daughter, and he clearly didn't like that a stranger had stepped into his role today. Dominic gave Ryan a slow, suspicious look, like he was waiting for him to slip up to reveal some ulterior motive for his heroism. The EMT cleared his throat. "You're lucky it missed bone. Should still get it checked at a hospital." Ryan just nodded. He didn't have insurance. Across the lot, his babysitter's car pulled up. Ryan had called her from the ambulance. Aiden hopped out, eyes wide, when he saw the bandage. "Dad." Aiden ran to him, stopping just short of hugging him, afraid of hurting the wound. Ryan gave him a small smile. "It's fine, bud. Just a scratch." Dominic was still watching him. Victoria was still silent. The feeling was clear. He'd done something good, but he didn't belong here in their world. He was a momentary intersection of lives that shouldn't have crossed. Now it was time for everyone to return to their proper places. Ryan led Aiden back to the babysitter's car. He'd catch a ride home with them, come back for his truck tomorrow. As they walked away, he felt Victoria's eyes on his back. He didn't turn around. Some distances weren't meant to be crossed. The apartment was quiet that night. Aiden had finally fallen asleep after asking a dozen questions about the shooting. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, a glass of water untouched before him, the bandage pulled tight across his arm. The local news played quietly on the small TV in the corner. A warehouse worker became an unlikely hero today, the anchor said, when he saved a young girl from what police are calling an attempted abduction at Westfield Mall. Ryan's grainy image filled the screen standing beside the ambulance. He looked smaller than he felt older in the harsh light. The caption beneath read, Ryan Hayes, 34, warehouse worker. The young girl has been identified as Sophie Bennett, daughter of Victoria Bennett, CEO of Horizon Innovations. Mrs. Bennett declined to comment, but sources say she is grateful for Mr. Hayes' intervention. Ryan switched off the TV. He hadn't asked for this attention, hadn't wanted his name or face on the news. Tomorrow people at work would ask questions. His supervisor would give him that look, half impressed, half suspicious, as if Ryan had somehow planned this disruption to the orderly warehouse routine. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister in Ohio. Saw you on the news, my brother, the hero. Ryan didn't respond. Hero, the words sat uncomfortably. Heroes were celebrated, heroes were seen. For 3 years, he'd worked at building a life where he could be invisible, where no one asked about the nightmares that sometimes woke him, shouting orders to men who weren't there, where no one wondered why a man with his training and skills was stocking shelves for minimum wage. The pain in his arm throbbed dully. He should take the prescription the EMT had written. But he wouldn't fill it. Too expensive. He'd managed with over-the-counter stuff, always had before. 2 days later, Ryan was back at work in the warehouse. The bandage on his arm tugged whenever he lifted a box, but he didn't say anything. His supervisor, Carl, was watching him from the office window like he always did when someone slowed down. Ryan kept moving. Nights here were long and quiet, rows of pallets, the beep of forklifts, the smell of cardboard. But tonight wasn't normal. Word had spread. Co-workers who had barely nodded at him for years now stopped to ask about the shooting. Some seemed genuinely concerned. Others just wanted the thrill of proximity to something exciting. Ryan kept his answers short, focused on his work. By midnight, most had lost interest. Near the end of his shift, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Hayes? The voice was sharp male. This is Dominic Reynolds, head of security for Horizon Innovations. Ryan stopped walking. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Mrs. Bennett would like to speak with you, in person, this afternoon at our headquarters. It wasn't a request. Ryan thought about refusing, but curiosity got the better of him. What could Victoria Bennett possibly want with him now? He agreed to be there at 2. That morning, after dropping Aiden at school, Ryan called his regular babysitter. She couldn't make a doctor's appointment. He tried his backup, an elderly neighbor who sometimes watched Aiden. She had bridge club. Ryan sat in his truck staring at his phone. He had exactly 2 childcare options, and both were unavailable. This was his life, a constant tightrope walk without a net. People with money didn't understand what it meant to have no slack in the system, no margin for unexpected meetings. Finally, he called his sister. She lived 2 hours away but had been wanting to visit. She agreed to come, though it would mean missing work herself. Another debt he'd have to repay somehow. At 2 o'clock, Ryan stood in the glass lobby of Horizon Innovations headquarters. It was all clean lines, expensive furniture, and people in suits moving fast with coffee cups in hand. He felt out of place in his flannel shirt and work jeans. The receptionist had looked him up and down when he gave his name, her smile never reaching her eyes. Mr. Reynolds will be with you shortly. Ryan sat in a chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The wound in his arm throbbed. He hadn't slept well, the combination of pain and late shift leaving him ragged around the edges. Above the reception desk and a large screen played a company promotional video. Victoria's face appeared, speaking confidently about innovation and the future. In that polished setting with perfect lighting and designer clothes, she seemed even further removed from his world than she had at the mall. Dominic appeared by the elevators. No handshake, no smile. This way, dear mom, he said. His tone was clipped. They walked in silence to the 27th floor. The elevator was fast and silent, nothing like the grinding machinery at the warehouse. Dominic led him through open office spaces where people glanced up briefly, then back to their screens. No one seemed surprised to see a man in worn jeans walking through. Perhaps Victoria Bennett often brought in strange charity cases. They walked into a conference room where Victoria was already seated at the head of the table. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, navy suit, hair perfect, but her eyes were tired and her phone was buzzing on the table. She silenced it without looking. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "we appreciate what you did at the mall." Ryan nodded. "I'm glad she's okay." Simple, direct, no need to elaborate. Dominic crossed his arms. "Here's the issue. You've been in the news. Some reporters are asking questions about you, your past. We'd like to make sure there's nothing that could put Mrs. Bennett or her daughter at risk." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I didn't do anything wrong." Dominic didn't flinch. "That's what we need to be certain of." Victoria leaned forward. "We live in a world where stories get twisted. I can't have my daughter's name linked to someone who might—" She stopped herself. "I just need to know you're not a threat." Ryan had been looked at this way before, like he had to prove he deserved to stand where he was. "I'm not a threat to anybody. I work. I take care of my kid, that's it." Dominic slid a piece of paper across the table. "Sign this non-disclosure agreement and agree to stop talking to the press if they find you. We'll also need to run a background check." Ryan stared at the paper. "So you want me to sign away my right to talk about saving her?" "It's about privacy," Dominic said. "It's about control," Ryan said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. The air in the room went still. Victoria's phone buzzed again. She didn't answer it. Instead, she studied Ryan with new intensity, as if seeing something in him she hadn't noticed before. There was a military precision to his posture, a controlled awareness of the space around him that most civilians lacked. "We're offering to cover any medical costs from the injury," she said, her tone softening slightly. "I'm fine," Ryan said, standing. "I didn't come here for money." Dominic stepped into his path. "Think about your son before you make this harder than it has to be." That hit harder than the bullet. Ryan went very still. His voice when it came was low but perfectly clear. "Don't ever use my son to threaten me." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, surprise, perhaps respect. For just a moment, her corporate mask slipped and Ryan caught a glimpse of the mother beneath the woman who had run through the mall in heels, desperate to find her child. "Mr. Reynolds, that's enough," she said. "Mr. Hayes is free to go." Ryan walked out without another word. In the elevator, he exhaled slowly, controlling the anger that had risen at Dominic's implied threat. He had spent years learning to manage that anger, to channel it into precision rather than explosion. Those were skills the Marines had given him, skills that had kept him alive in places where losing control meant losing everything. When Ryan got home, Aiden was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. His sister had made mac and cheese, Aiden's favorite. "How was it?" Aiden asked, pencil hovering over math problems. "Just a meeting," Ryan said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. He didn't mention the paper. He didn't mention the way Dominic had looked at him like a problem to be managed. Aiden had enough to worry about. Fourth grade was hard enough without adult problems. The next morning, Ryan's phone rang while he was making Aiden's lunch for school. Carl from the warehouse. "Ryan, Carl said corporate wants to talk to you. Seems they got a call from someone at Horizon Innovations." Ryan frowned. "About what?" Carl sighed. "Didn't say, but they're nervous. You know how it is. We can't have bad press. Might be best to take a few days off." A few days off meant no paycheck. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Aiden needed new winter boots. The bullet wound in Ryan's arm seemed to throb in time with his heartbeat. "Carl, I need the hours." "I know, man. But orders came from upstairs. Nothing I can do. Think of it as paid vacation. 2 days, that's all." But Ryan knew what paid vacation meant for hourly workers. It meant go away until we decide if you are worth the trouble. It meant your next paycheck will be light. It meant the razor-thin margin between making rent and falling behind just got thinner. Outside the kitchen window, Aiden was waiting for the school bus lunchbox in hand. He looked small in his too-big jacket, a hand-me-down from a cousin. Ryan had promised him a new one this winter. Promises were easy. Keeping them took money. Ryan's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He didn't answer. He didn't know yet if the shot he'd taken was the real wound, or if the worst was still coming. That night, Ryan sat at the kitchen table after Aiden went to bed. The TV was on low in the background, some news anchor talking about the mall shooting, but Ryan wasn't listening. He had a small wooden box in front of him. He hadn't opened it in years. The brass latch was worn from time, and when he flipped it open, the faint smell of oil and leather drifted out. Inside were three things: a folded American flag, a tarnished military challenge coin, and a letter creased so many times it was starting to tear at the edges. He didn't take the letter out. He just looked at it, remembering. The air was hot and dry, the kind that sticks in your throat. Ryan lay flat on the roof of a sand-colored building, his rifle balanced on its bipod. Through the scope, the streets below looked close enough to touch. He heard his spotter's voice in his ear. Calm, focused. He adjusted his breathing. Slow, steady, and locked on to the target. Every muscle in his body knew what to do without thinking. The shot had to count. It did. Back in the kitchen, Ryan shut the box and slid it back into the cupboard above the fridge behind a stack of old tax forms. He didn't talk about those years. Not to Aiden, not to anyone. People saw the worn baseball cap, the warehouse job, and thought they knew him. That was fine. Easier, even. But tonight, with Dominic's threat still echoing in his head, he wondered how far they'd go and if keeping quiet would protect Aiden or put him in more danger. At Horizon Innovations, Victoria was pacing her office. It was late, most of the building dark, but she couldn't shake the image of Ryan pushing Sophie to the ground, the way he'd moved fast, precise, no hesitation. She'd seen people freeze in emergencies. She'd seen people panic, but he hadn't done either. There was something about him she didn't understand. Dominic stepped in holding a folder. "We still don't have the full report on him," he said. "But I found a record of military service, honorable discharge. No details." Victoria looked up. "No details." Dominic shook his head. "Sealed." Victoria sat back, frowning. She didn't like loose ends. As CEO, her job was to manage risk, to know everything about anything that might affect her company. And now Sophie's name was linked in the press with a man whose background was mostly blank spaces. It wasn't acceptable. "Keep digging," she said. "I want to know who he really is." Across town, Ryan sat in the dark, his phone lighting up with another unknown call. He didn't answer, but a thought stayed in his mind. If they pushed him far enough, they'd find out exactly who he was. And that might not be what any of them wanted. The morning news was full of the mall shooting. Ryan watched while making Aiden's breakfast, the volume low so it wouldn't wake his son. The story had evolved overnight. Now it wasn't just about a random act of violence. Now there were questions about the gunman's intentions, about why he had targeted Sophie specifically. Sources close to the investigation suggest this may have been an attempted kidnapping rather than a random attack, the reporter said. The daughter of tech CEO Victoria Bennett would make a valuable hostage. Police are investigating possible connections to corporate espionage or extortion attempts. Ryan turned off the TV as Aiden came into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning, Dad." "Hey, bud, cereal's ready." Aiden sat at the table spooning Cheerios into his mouth. "Tommy at school said you're famous now. He saw you on TV." Ryan forced a smile. "Not famous, just in the right place at the right time." "Like a superhero," Aiden said through a mouthful of cereal. "But without the cape." Ryan ruffled his son's hair. "Eat up. Bus comes in 10 minutes. After Aiden left for school, Ryan checked his phone. 3 missed calls and a text message from an unknown number. "Need to speak with you urgently. D. Reynolds, Horizon Security." Ryan deleted the message. Whatever Dominic wanted, it could wait. Ryan had more immediate problems, like finding temporary work for the next few days, until the warehouse called him back. He had some contacts in construction. Maybe someone needed an extra pair of hands. He spent the morning making calls, calling in favors. By noon, he had lined up 2 days of work helping a former Marine buddy install drywall in a renovation project. Not great money, but better than nothing. Ryan was changing into work clothes when there was a knock at the door, loud, insistent. Through the peephole, he saw 2 men in suits and a woman with a badge. Federal agents. His stomach tightened. When he opened the door, the taller man spoke first. "Mr. Hayes, we need you to come with us. It's about the mall shooting." Ryan's gut tightened. "Am I under arrest?" "No," the woman said, "but your name has come up in connection to new threats against Victoria Bennett and her daughter." We believe the shooter wasn't acting alone. Aiden looked up from the table where he'd been drawing. Ryan crouched to meet his eyes. Finish your homework. I'll be back soon. Promise? Aiden's voice was small. Promise. Ryan grabbed his jacket, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his injured arm. He followed the agents out to a black SUV parked at the curb. The ride to Horizon Innovations was silent. Ryan watched the city pass by the gap between his neighborhood and the gleaming downtown towers growing wider with each block. The agents didn't offer information, and he didn't ask questions. He'd been in enough government vehicles to know when talking wouldn't help. At Horizon's headquarters, the building was swarming with security. The lobby that had been sleek and quiet days ago was now full of uniformed officers and anxious employees. Dominic was barking orders into a radio when Ryan walked in with the agents. His eyes narrowed instantly. "What's he doing here?" Dominic demanded. The woman with the badge replied, "Because he might be the only one who can stop what's about to happen." Ryan said nothing, but his eyes scanned the room. The nervous receptionist, the guards shifting at the entrance, the delivery truck idling too long outside the glass doors. Something clicked in his mind. He walked to the security monitors without asking permission. On one screen, a man in a cap and maintenance uniform wheeled a cart toward the service elevator. His posture was wrong, too rigid, too fast. "That's him," Ryan said. Dominic scoffed. "We've got hundreds of contractors here. What makes you think—" "His right hand never leaves his pocket," Ryan interrupted. "He's hiding something, and he's using a false gait to keep a limp from showing. That means prior injury, probably military or police." Dominic blinked, thrown off. "You can tell that from a grainy camera feed." Ryan didn't answer. He was already moving. The service hallway smelled like cleaning chemicals and oil. The man with the cart was halfway to the elevator when Ryan called out, "Stop right there." The man froze, then kept walking. Ryan's voice went sharper. "You don't want to do this." The man turned slightly, his left shoulder dipping, a telltale sign of someone reaching for a concealed weapon. Ryan closed the distance fast. His injured arm held tight to his side. His other hand moved like it remembered 1,000 repetitions. In one motion, he kicked the cart sideways, sending it crashing into the wall, and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until a black handgun clattered to the floor. The man swung at him, but Ryan ducked, hooked his leg, and brought him down hard. By the time security arrived, Ryan was kneeling on the man's back, the gun kicked out of reach. Back in the lobby, chaos had erupted. Employees gathered whispering. Victoria rushed in, pulling Sophie close when she saw the weapon in the evidence bag. Dominic tried to speak, but the lead officer cut him off. "If this man had gotten upstairs, we'd be dealing with a hostage situation right now." Hayes spotted him in under 10 seconds. Dominic's jaw worked, but no words came out. Victoria looked at Ryan, really looked at him for the first time without the filter of suspicion. "You've done this before." Ryan's voice was even. "Once or twice." Dominic finally spoke, his tone brittle. "You have training." Ryan didn't answer directly. "Let's just say I used to keep worse people than him from hurting good people." There was a long pause. Then Victoria turned to Dominic. "From now on, if Ryan says something's a threat, you listen." The shift was instant. The same man who had cornered Ryan in a conference room 2 days ago now stood silent, the power gone from his posture. Ryan felt no satisfaction in the victory. He knew how quickly tides could turn, how easily today's hero became tomorrow's liability. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the police were gone, Victoria approached Ryan. In the quiet of the lobby, "You didn't have to come today," she said. "I know," he replied. "You saved her twice now," she said, glancing towards Sophie, who was coloring at a table nearby. "And you stopped something we didn't even see coming." Ryan shrugged. "You just have to know where to look." For a moment, there was nothing but the soft sound of Sophie humming to herself. Then Victoria said, "Maybe I was wrong about you." Ryan gave a small smile. "Maybe." For the first time, Victoria seemed uncertain, her corporate armor showing a crack. "Mr. Hayes, Ryan, I'd like to talk more. About security. About what you saw that we missed." Ryan checked his watch. "I need to get back to Aiden, I promised." Understanding flashed in Victoria's eyes. "Of course, tomorrow then?" Ryan nodded. "Tomorrow." As he walked out of the building, Ryan felt lighter than he had in days. Not because of the recognition or the grudging respect he'd earned, but because for the first time in years, someone had seen what he could do instead of what he couldn't. Someone had valued the very skills he'd been hiding. He called his sister from the car the agents had arranged to take him home. "I might be late tomorrow," he said. "Can you stay another day with Aiden?" "Everything okay?" she asked. Ryan looked back at the Horizon building gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Yeah," he said, "I think it might be." The story hit the local news that night. Headlines read, "Warehouse worker stops second attack at Horizon Innovations." Clips showed security footage of Ryan bringing the suspect down. Reporters called him a hero and a man of few words. For once, the attention didn't come with suspicion. In his apartment, Ryan helped Aiden with math homework. The boy was struggling with fractions. "You have to find the common denominator," Ryan explained. "The number that connects them both." As he said it, Ryan thought about Victoria Bennett, how different their lives were, how unlikely their connection. Sometimes the universe found strange denominators, numbers that shouldn't divide evenly into each other, but somehow did. His phone buzzed with a text. "Victoria's personal number. Security briefing tomorrow 10 a.m. Car will pick you up at 9:30. Thank you for today." Ryan set the phone down. Aiden looked up from his homework. "Dad, are you going to be a hero again tomorrow?" Ryan smiled. "No, bud. Tomorrow I'm just going to be a guy who notices things. That's all I've ever been." But as he said it, Ryan knew something had changed. The invisible man had been seen. The walls he'd built around his past had cracked. And somewhere in that crack, a new possibility was taking root. That night, as Aiden slept, Ryan opened the wooden box again. This time, he took out the letter. The paper was thin, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was cramped but precise. "To the man who saved my children," it began. "There are no words for what you did for the shot you took when no one else could. My family will never know your name. Your country will never give you medals for this. But I will remember. And somewhere in this broken world, 3 children will grow up because you did what heroes do. You saw what needed to be done, and you did it without hesitation, without reward, without recognition." Ryan folded the letter carefully and returned it to the box. Tomorrow would bring questions he wasn't ready to answer about classified missions and skills the public wasn't supposed to know existed. But tonight, in the quiet of his small apartment, with his son sleeping safely down the hall, he allowed himself to remember the man he had been before he became invisible. The sniper on the rooftop. The Marine who never missed. The protector who saw threats before they materialized. Ryan Hayes closed the box and placed it on the shelf. Tomorrow he would step into the light just a little. Not for recognition or reward, but because sometimes being unseen wasn't a choice, it was a luxury others couldn't afford. Sophie couldn't hide from those who would harm her. Victoria couldn't shield her company from threats she couldn't see. Sometimes the greatest act of protection was making yourself visible again. 2 days later, Victoria asked him to come back to Horizon Innovations. This time when he stepped into the lobby, the employees didn't stare with doubt. Some smiled. One woman even clapped softly as he passed. Word had traveled fast. Ryan kept his head down, uncomfortable with the attention, but steadied by the purpose that had brought him here. Victoria met him in her office, the skyline behind her glowing in the late afternoon light. She stood instead of sitting behind the desk. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I judged you based on how you looked, not who you are. That's not the kind of person I want to be, or the example I want to set for my daughter." Ryan nodded but didn't let her off the hook with a quick, "It's fine." He stayed quiet, letting her fill the silence. "I also owe you thanks," she continued. "Twice now you've put yourself in danger to protect Sophie. That's not something I can repay with words." She took a breath. "I'd like to offer you a position here, security consultant to start, working with our team to identify vulnerabilities." Ryan blinked. "I already have a job." Victoria smiled faintly. "One that barely pays you and doesn't use half your skills. This would come with benefits, health insurance for you and your son, and a salary that means you don't have to worry about rent every month." He looked at her for a long moment. "You sure your head of security will be okay with that?" Her smile sharpened. "Dominic has been placed on administrative leave pending review. His arrogance nearly cost lives." Ryan moved to the window, looking out at the city below. From up here, the warehouse district where he worked was just a cluster of gray rectangles in the distance. "I don't belong in a place like this," he said quietly. "Neither did I once," Victoria replied. I grew up in a double-wide trailer in Rowell, Pennsylvania. My father worked road construction. My mother cleaned houses for the wealthy. I was the first in my family to go to college. Ryan turned surprise evident in his face. People see me now and assume I was born into this, Victoria continued. They don't see the years of fighting to be taken seriously, of being underestimated, of having to work twice as hard for half the recognition. We're not so different, you and I. For the first time, Orion saw her not as the CEO, not as Sophie's mother, but as a woman who had built walls of her own, who understood what it meant to be judged by appearances rather than abilities. I'll think about it, he said. Victoria nodded. That's all I ask. As Ryan left the building, his phone buzzed. The warehouse. Carl's voice was apologetic. Corporate says you can come back tomorrow, but they're watching. Any more publicity and... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ryan hung up and stood on the sidewalk, caught between two worlds. Behind him, the gleaming tower of Horizon Innovations reached toward the sky. Ahead, the long bus ride back to his apartment, to the life he'd carefully constructed from the ruins of his old one. A text message appeared on his screen. Victoria again. The offer stands, no rush. But know this, you saved more than my daughter. You saved me from making a terrible mistake in judgment. Whatever you decide, thank you for that. Ryan slipped the phone into his pocket and began walking toward the bus stop. The afternoon sun warmed his face. For the first time in years, he walked with his head up, his shoulders straight, his gaze meeting those who passed, the invisible man stepping cautiously into the light. 3 days after stopping the second attack, Ryan sat alone in his truck outside Horizon Innovations. The morning sun glinted off the building's glass exterior, making it seem like a massive jewel rising from the concrete. His hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The decision he'd been wrestling with seemed heavier in the daylight. Accept Victoria's offer and step back into a world of security and threats, or return to the warehouse where he could blend into the shadows. Both paths had costs. Both would reshape his life and Aiden's. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. Did you decide yet? Aiden asked me this morning if you're going to be a superhero for real now. Ryan smiled despite himself. Kids saw things so simply. To Aiden, this was an adventure story where his dad was the hero. But Ryan knew better. Real heroes didn't get second chances. They didn't get to rebuild their lives after they had been shattered. They just kept carrying the weight until it broke them. Still, Victoria's offer lingered in his mind. Benefits, health insurance, a salary that would mean no more choosing between new shoes for Aiden and paying the electric bill. And beneath those practical considerations, something else, a chance to use the skills he'd spent years trying to forget to be valued for the very things that had once set him apart. Ryan checked his watch. He was already 10 minutes late for his shift at the warehouse. The choice was making itself. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, heading not toward Horizon, but toward the industrial district, where the warehouse stood like a gray fortress against the morning sky. Carl met him at the loading dock, clipboard in hand. Thought you weren't coming. Got held up. Ryan punched his time card, already reaching for his safety vest. There's some guys from corporate here. They want to talk to you. Carl's expression was carefully neutral, but the tension around his eyes told Ryan everything he needed to know. The meeting was brief and clinical. Two men in suits Ryan had never seen before and would never see again. They sat across from him in the break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Words like company image and potential liability floated between them. Ryan barely listened. He'd heard versions of this speech before in other contexts from other men who'd never done the work, but always made the decisions. We value your contributions, the older suit said, sliding a white envelope across the table. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 2 weeks' pay plus your accrued vacation time. Ryan knew what it was before he opened it. Termination papers. Clean, corporate, and efficient. No mess, no fuss. Just the invisible man being erased one more time. He signed the papers without argument. There was no point. The decision had been made long before he'd walked through the door. As he handed back the clipboard, the younger suit cleared his throat. You understand that you're not to discuss the circumstances of your separation with the media. Ryan met his gaze steadily. I don't talk to the media. His voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made both men shift uncomfortably. Outside in the bright morning sun, Ryan sat in his truck again. The severance check would cover rent for a month, maybe 6 weeks if he was careful. After that, he didn't finish the thought. One battle at a time. That's how he'd survived before. That's how he'd survive now. His phone rang. Victoria's number. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. On the fourth try, he answered. "I've been calling you for days." Victoria's voice carried the crisp authority of someone used to immediate responses. "Been busy. I need your answer, Ryan. The position is still open, but I have a board meeting tomorrow, and I need to present my security restructuring plan." Ryan watched a forklift load pallets onto a truck. A world he'd been part of just 30 minutes ago now closed to him. "I just got fired." The line went silent for a moment. "Because of what happened at Horizon. Because I'm a liability. Because I made the news." Victoria's voice softened slightly. "Then the timing is perfect. Come work for us." Ryan closed his eyes. The universe had a strange way of closing doors and opening windows. Or maybe it was just shoving him through the window because he'd been too stubborn to use the door. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive to Horizon felt different this time. Not a journey into foreign territory, but a return to something familiar. The skills Victoria wanted from him, the alertness, the ability to spot threats, the quick decision-making, these were the very things that had once defined him. The things he'd tried to bury beneath boxes and invoices and the quiet routine of the warehouse. Security met him in the lobby. Not Dominic this time, but a younger man with a military haircut and the respectful nod of someone who recognized a fellow veteran. Ryan was escorted not to Victoria's office, but to a conference room where 3 people waited. Victoria, a woman he didn't recognize, and a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Ryan, this is Jennifer Reeves, my executive assistant." Victoria gestured to the younger woman, and Wallace Morris, chairman of our board. Wallace extended his hand. His grip was firm, assessing. "I understand you've twice intervened in threats against our CEO and her daughter." Ryan nodded once. "Right place, right time." "Victoria tells me you have military background, special training." Ryan kept his face neutral. "I served." Wallace exchanged a glance with Victoria. "She wants to hire you as security consultant. I'm not convinced." Victoria's spine straightened almost imperceptibly. Ryan's instincts and training have already proven invaluable. He identified a threat our entire security team missed. "And we're grateful," Wallace conceded. "But there's a difference between a heroic moment and a corporate security position. We need credentials, experience, a track record." Ryan remained silent. This was familiar territory being discussed as if he weren't in the room having his worth assessed by people who had never stood where he had never made the choices he'd been forced to make. "If I may," Jennifer spoke up, surprising everyone. "I've reviewed Mr. Hayes' military record, what's available of it. Force recon, multiple deployments, specialized training in threat assessment and neutralization. His record speaks for itself." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. His military file was heavily redacted, the details of most of his operations sealed. The fact that she'd found anything at all was both impressive and concerning. Wallace seemed unmoved. "Military experience doesn't always translate to corporate security. Our shareholders expect professionals with established credentials." Victoria's voice took on an edge Ryan hadn't heard before. "Our shareholders expect us to keep this company secure. Ryan has demonstrated abilities our entire security team lacked. I'm hiring him, Wallace. This meeting was a courtesy, not a request for permission." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Wallace's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Perhaps, but it's my mistake to make." Victoria's tone made it clear the discussion was over. After Wallace left, the atmosphere in the room lightened. Jennifer offered Ryan a small smile. "Sorry about that. The board is traditional in their thinking." Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the city. "Wallace thinks in terms of credentials and pedigrees. He doesn't understand that sometimes the most valuable skills come from places you can't put on a resume." Ryan studied her profile against the bright window. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know me." Victoria turned, meeting his gaze directly. "I know enough. I know you saved my daughter without hesitation. I know you spotted a threat in seconds that our entire security team missed. And I know that when you walked into this building, you immediately assessed exits, sightlines, and potential vulnerabilities. I saw you do it. That's not something you can teach. That's something you live. For the first time since entering the building, Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. Victoria had really seen him in a way few people ever had. Not the warehouse worker, not the single dad struggling to make ends meet, but the trained operative whose senses never truly switched off, who carried his past in the way he moved through the world. "When can you start?" Victoria asked. "I need to pick up Aiden from school at 3. Victoria nodded. "Jennifer will handle your paperwork and get you set up. We'll work around your schedule for now." She moved toward the door, then paused. "And Ryan, wear whatever makes you comfortable. I don't care if you never put on a suit. I just care that you see what others miss." After Victoria left, Jennifer helped Ryan navigate the maze of corporate onboarding forms, badges, system access, and the 100 small details that transformed a stranger into an employee. As they worked, Jennifer's efficiency reminded Ryan of the best operations officers he'd known in the service, thorough, detail-oriented, and always 3 steps ahead. "Victoria doesn't usually go against Wallace," Jennifer remarked as she entered Ryan's information into the system. "He was her mentor when she first joined the company. She values his opinion." "Then why did she this time?" Jennifer looked up from her tablet. "Because you terrify him." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I haven't done anything to him." "It's not what you've done, it's what you represent. Someone who can't be controlled by the usual corporate levers. Someone whose value comes from within rather than from the institutions Wallace respects." Jennifer's fingers flew over the screen. "And because Sophie hasn't stopped talking about the hero man since the mall, Victoria might be CEO, but she's a mother first." By the time Ryan left to pick up Aiden, he had a temporary badge, a company email, and a contract that made his eyes widen when he saw the salary figure. It was 3 times what he'd made at the warehouse. The health insurance would start immediately covering both him and Aiden. For the first time in years, he felt the grinding pressure of financial insecurity begin to ease. Aiden was waiting at the school gate, his backpack slung over one shoulder, in a posture that suddenly reminded Ryan so much of himself that it made his chest tighten. His son was growing up taking on mannerisms and expressions Ryan hadn't consciously taught him. Time was moving too fast. "Did you take the job, Dad?" Aiden asked as he climbed into the truck. "How'd you know about that?" Aiden rolled his eyes in the way only 8-year-olds could perfect. "Aunt Lisa told me. She said you might get to wear a suit and have a fancy office." Ryan smiled. "I took the room, but no suit, and I don't know about the office yet." "Is it because of the girl you saved, Sophie?" "Partly. Her mom runs the company. She thinks I can help keep everyone safe." Aiden was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Like you used to do in the Marines before Mom died?" The question caught Ryan off guard. He'd never discussed his military service in detail with Aiden, just the broad outlines. Dad was in the Marines. Dad protected people. Dad came home when Mom got sick. The rest, the specialized training, the classified operations, the things he'd seen and done, those were buried deep, protected from his son's innocent eyes. "Something like that," Ryan said finally, "but different too. No more long deployments. No more being away from you." Aiden nodded, satisfied. "Good, because Tommy says his dad was in the Army and he's gone all the time. I like having you home." That night, after Aiden was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open to Horizon's website. The About Us page showed Victoria standing with a group of executives, Wallace among them. The corporate biography listed her impressive credentials: MBA from Wharton, previous executive positions at 2 other tech firms, numerous awards and recognitions. Nothing about the trailer in rural Pennsylvania. Nothing about the path that had taken her from there to here. We all have our cover stories, Ryan thought. The narratives we present to the world, carefully edited to show only what we want others to see. His was the simple warehouse worker, the unassuming single dad. Hers was the polished executive, the natural-born leader. Both masks hiding more complex truths beneath. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Heard you're joining the team. Welcome aboard. Some of us are grabbing drinks tomorrow after work if you want to join." Mike's Security Operations. Ryan set the phone down without responding. The social aspects of corporate life were foreign territory. In the warehouse, relationships were simple. You worked your shift, maybe exchanged a few words about sports or weekend plans and went home. No happy hours, no networking, no navigating the invisible lines of office politics. Another text came through, this one from Victoria. First security briefing tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your perspective, not what you think we want to hear. Ryan closed the laptop. Tomorrow he would step into a new role, a new identity. Not quite the Marine he'd been. Not quite the warehouse worker he'd become, but something in between. Something new that he was still figuring out. The security briefing room at Horizon was state-of-the-art, multiple screens displaying camera feeds, access logs, and threat assessment dashboards. The team consisted of 6 people, all men, all with backgrounds in either law enforcement or private security. They watched Ryan with expressions ranging from curiosity to open skepticism as he took a seat at the back of the room. Mike, the one who had texted him, approached with an extended hand. Mike Daniels, operations lead. Glad to have you on board. The others introduced themselves with professional courtesy but reserved judgment. Ryan recognized the look. He was an outsider, an unknown quantity, someone brought in over their heads by the CEO herself. They would work with him because they had to, but trust would have to be earned. Victoria arrived precisely at 9, Jennifer 2 steps behind her with a tablet in hand. Good morning, gentlemen. I see you've met Ryan Hayes, our new security consultant. The briefing was comprehensive but revealed gaps that made Ryan uneasy. The team was focused on traditional security concerns, access control, surveillance event, security, but seemed to lack awareness of more sophisticated threats. When Ryan asked about digital surveillance countermeasures and pattern recognition in potential hostile reconnaissance, he was met with blank stares. We leave the cyber stuff to a T, explained Frank, the eldest of the security team. We handle physical security. Ryan exchanged a glance with Victoria. The people targeting your company don't make that distinction, he said quietly. They use all available vectors to gather intelligence and plan their approach. Frank bristled visibly. With all due respect, we've been securing this building for 7 years without incident. Until last week, Ryan pointed out. The room went silent. Victoria stepped in smoothly. That's precisely why Ryan is here, to help us see the blind spots we didn't know we had. She turned to Ryan. What would you recommend as first priorities? Ryan considered carefully. These men were professionals in their field. Alienating them would only create resistance. Integration, he said finally. Security isn't just cameras and guards. It's understanding the full spectrum of threats and how they interconnect. We need IT in these meetings. We need to know about executive travel plans, public appearances, social media presence. We need to start thinking like the people who want to harm this company, not just respond after they make their move. To Ryan's surprise, Mike nodded slowly. He's right. We've been operating in silos. IT does their thing, we do ours. External threats, internal threats, cyber threats, all separated. Victoria made a note on her tablet. Jennifer set up a cross-functional security meeting for tomorrow. IT, HR, communications, legal. Let's start breaking down these walls. She looked around the room. Gentlemen, I expect your full cooperation with Ryan. His expertise has already saved lives in this building. That's not up for debate. After the meeting, Ryan found himself alone with Victoria in the elevator. They don't like me, he observed. They don't know you, Victoria corrected. Give it time. Results speak louder than resumes in this business. Wallace doesn't like me either. Victoria's lips curved in a small smile. Wallace doesn't like anything that disrupts his orderly view of how the world should work. He'll come around or he won't. Either way, you're here because I want you here. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. I have a board meeting, Victoria said. Jennifer will show you to your office, such as it is. Ryan's office turned out to be a small room near the Security Operations Center previously used for storage. A desk had been wedged into one corner, a computer setup but not yet connected. The walls were bare except for a large map of the building and surrounding area. Sorry about the accommodations, Jennifer said. Space is tight and this was the best we could do on short notice. Ryan surveyed the room, mentally calculating sight lines to the main entry points, distance to stairwells, and overall defensive positioning. It's perfect. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. It's a glorified closet, with direct visual access to the main security monitors and quick access to 2 exit routes. Ryan moved to the window, checking the view of the street below. "I've worked in worse." Jennifer studied him with new interest. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more, I don't know, aggressive. Most security specialists I've met like to make their presence known." "You seem to prefer being underestimated." Ryan turned from the window. "Being underestimated keeps you alive in certain parts of the world." Jennifer's expression softened. "Not all battlefields are overseas, Ryan. Some are right here in corporate America." She handed him a folder. "These are the security assessments from the last 2 years. I thought you might want to review them." And this, she placed a key card on the desk, "will get you access to all areas except the server rooms. It is still paranoid about the new guy." As Jennifer turned to leave, Ryan called after her. "How did you know about my military record?" She paused in the doorway. "I'm very good at my job, and Victoria doesn't make decisions like this lightly." She needed to know who she was bringing into her company, into her daughter's life. After Jennifer left, Ryan sat at the desk and opened the security reports. They were thorough but conventional, focused on incidents rather than patterns. Break-ins, corporate espionage attempts, disgruntled employee incidents, all documented and resolved according to standard protocols. But nowhere did he see the kind of integrated threat assessment he'd been trained to develop, the kind that looked not just at what had happened, but at what could happen based on evolving patterns. He was still reviewing the files when Mike appeared in his doorway. "We've got a situation." Ryan followed Mike to the Security Operations Center, where multiple screens showed a protest forming outside the building. Signs denounced Horizon's latest facial recognition technology, calling it invasive and dangerous. "Started about 20 minutes ago," Mike explained. "Looks peaceful so far, but we're concerned about escalation." Ryan scanned the feeds, noting the composition of the crowd, the positioning of protest leaders, the police response forming at the edges. "Have you seen any of these faces before at other protests or around the building?" Mike shook his head. "We don't typically track individuals unless they have been flagged as threats." "Start tracking now," Ryan said. "Look for anyone taking photos of entry points, security positions, staff coming and going. Anyone too interested in the building rather than the protest itself." Mike gave instructions to his team, who began reviewing footage with new focus. Ryan continued to study the screens, his attention caught by a man standing slightly apart from the main group. He wasn't chanting or holding a sign. He was watching, his gaze methodically scanning the building's perimeter. "That one," Ryan pointed. "Get me a closer look." The camera zoomed in. The man was in his 40s, wearing a nondescript jacket and cap. Nothing remarkable about him except the disciplined way he observed the slight bulge under his jacket that suggested a concealed weapon, and the comm device just visible in his ear. "He's not a protester," Ryan said. "He's using the protest as cover for surveillance. There may be others." Mike looked skeptical. "How can you tell?" "Because I've done the same thing." Ryan turned to the team. "Check all entry points. They'll be watching staff exits, delivery entrances, anywhere people might move in or out during a situation like this." The team found 2 more observers positioned at strategic points around the building, all maintaining distance from the actual protest, all with the same focused attention on the building's security measures. "What are they doing?" Frank asked, his earlier skepticism giving way to concern. "Gathering intelligence," Ryan said. "Testing your response protocols, seeing how you handle disruption." He turned to Mike. "Does Victoria have any public appearances scheduled soon? Speaking engagements, charity events, anything where her movements would be predictable?" Mike checked the calendar. "Charity gala next week, annual event for the Children's Hospital. She's the keynote speaker." Ryan's expression darkened. "That's what they're preparing for. A target of opportunity when she's outside the building's security perimeter." "Should we cancel?" Frank asked. Ryan considered for a moment. "No, that just postpones the problem. We need to identify who these people are and what they're planning." He looked at the team gathered around him. "And we need to set up our own surveillance, turn their game back on them." For the next hour, Ryan worked with the security team to establish counter-surveillance positions and protocols. To his surprise, once he demonstrated his expertise, the team's resistance faded. They were professionals who recognized skill when they saw it, even if it came in an unexpected package. By early afternoon, they had identified and were tracking 5 suspicious individuals using the protest as cover. Police had been quietly notified to watch but not approach. Ryan had established a network of observation points that gave them comprehensive coverage of all approaches to the building. Victoria found him in the security center as the protest was beginning to disperse. Jennifer said there was a situation. Ryan briefed her concisely, pointing out the surveillance operation they'd uncovered. They're gathering intelligence for something bigger, likely targeting you at the charity gala next week. Victoria absorbed this without visible reaction. Recommendations. We could cancel your appearance. Not an option. That gala raises millions for children's cancer research. I'm not going to let threats dictate my charitable commitments. Ryan nodded, having expected this response. Then we changed the security approach. Different route, different timing, different entry point, and we used the opportunity to identify who's behind this. Victoria studied the security feeds. These aren't ordinary corporate spies or activists. No, Ryan agreed. They're professionals, military or intelligence background. This is a coordinated operation. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, not fear, but a cold, calculating anger. Someone is targeting my company and using my charity work to do it. It's not just the company, Ryan said quietly. It's you specifically. The attack at the mall, the infiltration attempt here, both focused on locations where you or Sophie would be present. Victoria's composure wavered slightly at the mention of her daughter. Sophie has a school field trip tomorrow. Should I keep her home? Ryan considered carefully. No, disrupting her routine will only cause anxiety, but I'd like to have someone watching the school, just as a precaution. I'll arrange it, Victoria said. And Ryan, thank you for seeing what we missed. As Victoria left, Mike approached. The team's impressed. Nobody spotted those guys until you pointed them out. Ryan shrugged. It's just pattern recognition. You start to see it when you have been on both sides of the equation. Mike gave him a curious look. Just what did you do in the Marines? Ryan's expression closed. That's classified. Mike nodded slowly. Fair enough. But whatever it was, I'm glad you're on our side now. He checked his watch. Weren't you supposed to pick up your kid? Ryan looked at the time and swore softly. It was nearly 3. I need to go. Go, Mike said. We've got this covered. Team drinks are still on for tonight if you can make it. Ryan hurried out, calling his sister as he took the elevator down. Lisa, can you pick up Aiden? I'm running late. Already did, she replied. Figured your new job might keep you. He's helping me make cookies. Relief washed over Ryan. I owe you. Yes, you do. And Ryan, he's proud of you. Keeps telling everyone his dad is a superhero now. After hanging up, Ryan stood in the lobby, suddenly struck by the contrast between the sleek corporate environment around him and the simple life he'd built with Aiden. Worlds colliding in ways he hadn't anticipated. He'd taken this job for the stability, the security, the benefits, but it was already pulling him back toward a life he'd left behind, reawakening instincts and skills he'd tried to bury. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza. The protest had completely dispersed, but Ryan's trained eye caught the lone figure still watching from across the street, the same man he'd identified earlier. Their eyes met briefly, a flash of recognition passing between them. Not personal recognition, but professional, 2 operators acknowledging each other's presence on the field. The man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ryan made a mental note of his face, his build, his gait, details that might prove crucial in the days ahead. That evening, Ryan declined the team drinks invitation, choosing instead to spend time with Aiden. They ate dinner at their small kitchen table, Aiden chattering about school and friends and a science project on volcanoes. Normal everyday concerns that anchored Ryan to this life he'd built, reminding him why he'd chosen it in the first place. Dad, is your new job dangerous? Aiden asked, suddenly interrupting his own story about recess kickball. Ryan considered how to answer. He'd never lied to his son, but there were truths too heavy for 8-year-old shoulders. Sometimes it might be, but that's why they hired me, because I know how to handle dangerous things and keep people safe. Aiden nodded solemnly. Like you did for Sophie. Like that, yes. Is Sophie nice? Tommy said her mom is super rich and famous. Ryan smiled at the simplicity of children's connections. She seems nice, and her mom is important at her company, but she works hard just like other parents. Does Sophie have a dad? The question caught Ryan off guard. I don't know, bud. I haven't asked. Aiden poked at his peas. It's okay not to have both, you know. Some kids at school just have a mom. I just have you, and that's okay. Ryan felt a familiar ache in his chest, the empty space where Aiden's mother should have been. 3 years gone, and still the absence felt raw some days. You're right, it is okay. Families come in all different shapes. Maybe Sophie and her mom could come over sometime. I could show her my volcano project. Ryan nearly choked on his water. The image of Victoria Bennett in their modest apartment, sitting at their scratched kitchen table, was almost comical. Maybe someday, bud. Right now I'm still new at this job. After putting Aiden to bed, Ryan sat on the fire escape outside their apartment window, the night air cool against his face. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Identified 2 of the surveillance subjects, former military contractors, now working private sector, details tomorrow. Ryan wasn't surprised. The precision of their operation had the hallmarks of professional training. The question was, who had hired them? Corporate rivals, political activists, or something more personal? His phone buzzed again. Victoria this time. Wallace wants to meet with you tomorrow, 8 a.m. He's still not convinced. Be prepared. Ryan slipped the phone back into his pocket, his gaze drifting to the city skyline. Somewhere out there, people were planning their next move against Victoria and Horizon, and he was now squarely in their sightline, a new variable in their carefully calculated equation. He thought about Aiden asleep inside, about the life they'd built together after Maria's death, the quiet, anonymous existence that had been their healing place. Taking this job had shattered that anonymity, drawn them back into a world of threats and countermoves. Was it worth the risk? The answer came to him as he watched a plane's lights move slowly across the night sky. Sometimes safety wasn't found in hiding. Sometimes it came from facing threats directly, from using the very skills that made you dangerous to protect what mattered most. He'd learned that lesson in the deserts and mountains where he'd served. Perhaps it was time to remember it here at home. The next morning, Ryan arrived at Horizon at 7:30, giving himself time to review security footage before meeting Wallace. The night team had continued monitoring known surveillance subjects, tracking their movements throughout the evening. All had eventually returned to the same hotel on the outskirts of the city, confirming Ryan's suspicion that they were operating as a coordinated unit. Wallace was waiting in a small conference room, a cup of coffee and a tablet in front of him. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his suit clearly custom-made. Everything about him projected authority and establishment credentials. Mr. Hayes, Wallace gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Ryan took the seat but remained silent, letting Wallace set the tone for the meeting. Victoria speaks highly of your instincts. Wallace began, the slight pause suggesting skepticism. She believes you bring valuable perspective to our security team. But you don't, Ryan said simply. Wallace's expression remained neutral. I believe in credentials and proven track records, in verifiable expertise. Your military record is largely classified. Your work history, since leaving the service, consists of a warehouse job. Nothing in your background suggests expertise in corporate security. Ryan met his gaze steadily. With respect, Mr. Morris' expertise isn't always found on paper. Perhaps not, but shareholders and board members find comfort in paper, in formal qualifications, in knowing that the people protecting this company have been properly vetted and certified. The people targeting this company don't care about certifications, Ryan countered. They care about vulnerabilities, about patterns and openings they can exploit. My job is to see those before they do. Wallace leaned forward slightly. And what exactly did you see yesterday during the protest? Ryan recognized the test. Wallace was checking if Victoria had briefed him on their private conversation, if he was merely repeating company talking points. I saw 5 trained surveillance operators using the protest as cover to map your security response patterns. I saw professionals with military or intelligence backgrounds gathering data for a future operation, likely targeting Mrs. Bennett at the charity gala next week. Something flickered in Wallace's eyes, surprise, perhaps respect. And how do you know they were professionals? Their positioning, their discipline, the way they communicated without obvious signals, the equipment they carried. These weren't activists or corporate spies. These were tactical operators conducting pre-mission reconnaissance. Wallace was silent for a moment, reassessing. Victoria mentioned you served in the Marines, Force Recon? Ryan nodded once. That explains some things, Wallace said, but not everything. Force Recon is elite, certainly, but it doesn't typically train for the kind of corporate security and counterintelligence work we need here. Ryan felt a cold smile touch his lips. Mr. Morris, with all due respect, you have no idea what Force Recon trains for or what missions I was part of. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Wallace studied Ryan with new intensity. No, I suppose I don't. Those records are sealed, aren't they? Even to someone with my connections. Even to someone with your connections, Ryan confirmed. Wallace sat back, a decision visibly forming behind his eyes. Victoria believes in you. That counts for something. She's rarely wrong about people. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Prove her right, Mr. Hayes, for all our sakes. As Wallace left, Ryan remained seated, processing the interaction. Wallace hadn't become convinced, but he'd shifted from active opposition to watchful waiting. It was progress, however small. Jennifer found him still in the conference room. How did it go with Wallace? He's reserving judgment. That's actually high praise from him, Jennifer said with a small smile. Most people get an outright dismissal. She handed him a tablet. I've compiled profiles on the surveillance subjects we identified yesterday. All former military, now working for a private security firm called Argent Strategic Services. Ryan scrolled through the information. Argent is high-end. They don't take small contracts or questionable clients. Whoever hired them has serious resources and legitimate business credentials. That narrows it down to about 50 potential corporate rivals. Jennifer sighed. I'll start cross-referencing with the recent competitive situations, lost contracts, talent poaching incidents. Ryan continued studying the profiles. Something about the operation felt personal, targeted in a way that transcended ordinary corporate espionage. Look for connections to Victoria specifically, not just the company. Former colleagues, rivals from business school, personal relationships gone sour. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You think this is about her, not Horizon Chum? The attack at the mall targeted Sophie specifically. The second attempt came when Victoria was in the building. Both incidents feel like messages, not just security breaches. Ryan handed back the tablet. Someone wants her to feel vulnerable, watched. That's more personal than corporate. I'll dig deeper, Jennifer promised. In the meantime, Victoria wants you at the security planning meeting for the charity gala. 3 o'clock in the main conference room. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of security assessments, system reviews, and team introductions. By lunch, Ryan had identified 17 vulnerabilities in Horizon's physical security, most minor but a few significant enough to warrant immediate attention. The team had been surprisingly receptive to his observations. Professional pride temporarily set aside in favor of improving their operations. At noon, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Need to speak with you? My office now. When Ryan arrived, he found Victoria staring out her office window, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. We have a problem, she said without turning. Sophie's school just called. Someone tried to pick her up, claiming to be her uncle. When challenged for identification, they left quickly. The school went on temporary lockdown. Ryan felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Is Sophie okay? Yes, she doesn't even know it happened. But Ryan, suddenly Victoria turned, then her composure cracking slightly. They knew which classroom she was in. They knew her teacher's name. This wasn't random. Did the school get a description, security footage? Man in his 30s, baseball cap, sunglasses, nothing distinctive. Camera at the entrance caught him, but the quality is poor. Victoria's hands gripped the edge of her desk, knuckles white. This is escalating. Ryan moved to the window, scanning the view of the city as he thought. They're applying pressure, testing boundaries. The surveillance yesterday, the attempt today, they're mapping your vulnerabilities, personal and professional. Why wouldn't they want? I don't know yet, but they're being methodical, which means they have a specific objective. Ryan turned to face her. Until we identify them and their motives, we need to tighten security around you and Sophie. Victoria's professional mask slipped further, revealing the mother beneath the CEO. I can't keep her locked away, Ryan. She's 7 years old. She has school friends, activities. I'm not suggesting isolation, but we need controlled environments, known variables. No deviation from established routines without security in place. Ryan hesitated, then added, and you might consider bringing her here after school for the next few days. The security here is better than at your home. Victoria nodded slowly. I can set up the small conference room as a homework space. She spent time here before when childcare fell through. She met Ryan's gaze directly. Will you help coordinate her security personally? The team respects you, and you've already proven you can spot threats they miss. The request was both professional and deeply personal. Victoria wasn't just asking as CEO, she was asking as a mother entrusting her child's safety to someone she barely knew but had come to rely on. Of course, Ryan said, I'll need to coordinate with Aiden's after-school care, but we can make it work. Relief washed over Victoria's face. Thank you. I don't think I've said that properly yet for everything. So, thank you. Ryan nodded, once uncomfortable with the gratitude. In his experience, thanks often came right before things went sideways, but he kept that thought to himself. As he left Victoria's office, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Security footage identified a second subject at the school. Same group as yesterday. This is coordinated. Ryan texted back, meeting and security ops 30 minutes. Bring all footage. The pattern was becoming clear. Whoever was targeting Victoria was systematically testing all aspects of her life, professional, personal, maternal. They were building a comprehensive picture of her security arrangements, routines, and emotional pressure points. And they were getting bolder. As Ryan walked toward the Security Operations Center, he felt an old familiar tension building at the base of his skull, the awareness of impending conflict of moves and countermoves in a game where the stakes were measured in lives rather than dollars. It was a sensation he hadn't felt since his last deployment, a hyper-awareness that once would have sent him into mission planning mode. Now, years later, in thousands of miles from any official battlefield, that same alertness was returning. But this time it wasn't anonymous targets in distant lands. This time it was a 7-year-old girl and her mother who had against all odds begun to matter to him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Ryan stopped at the window overlooking the city, his reflection ghostly against the afternoon skyline. The invisible man was becoming visible again, stepping back into a role he'd thought he'd left behind. Protector, guardian, the one who saw threats before they materialized. His phone buzzed again. A text from his sister. Aiden wants to know if you're catching bad guys today. Ryan smiled despite himself. Out of the mouths of children came the simplest truths. Yes, he was catching bad guys again. And this time it wasn't just for duty or country. This time it was for a little girl in a yellow dress and her mother who had seen value in him when others saw only what he lacked. Some battles chose you. This one had found him in a shopping mall on an ordinary Tuesday, and now there were no walking away. Not until the threat was identified and neutralized. Not until Sophie and Victoria were safe. Ryan turned from the window and headed toward the security center with renewed purpose. The invisible man was invisible no more. The charity gala loomed 3 days away, and Ryan had transformed Victoria's office into an impromptu command center. Blueprints of the hotel venue covered one wall, security rotation schedules another. Jennifer had coordinated with hotel staff, police, and Horizon's team to create layers of protection that should have been impenetrable. But Ryan knew better. In his experience, impenetrable was just another word for not yet penetrated. You look like you're planning a military operation, Victoria observed from the doorway, coffee cup in hand. Ryan didn't look up from the venue schematics. That's exactly what this is. For the past week, Sophie had been brought to Horizon after school homework spread across a conference room table, while Aiden sat beside her, the two children forming an unexpected friendship. At first, it had been awkward, the CEO's daughter and the security consultant's son from entirely different worlds. But children adapted faster than adults, finding common ground in video games and science projects. Victoria moved to stand beside Ryan, studying the detailed plans. Is all this really necessary? It's a charity event, not a presidential visit. The people watching you don't care about the charity. They care about predictability. Ryan pointed to 3 marked positions around the hotel. We've confirmed surveillance teams at these locations for the past 48 hours. They're mapping staff rotations, security positions, and timing patterns. Victoria frowned. And we're still going forward. Shouldn't we cancel? Canceling just postpones the problem. They'll adapt to whatever you reschedule. Ryan straightened, meeting her gaze directly. Besides, they've shown their hand by being this visible. That gives us an advantage. What advantage? They think they are the hunters. We need to make them the hunted. Victoria studied him, taking in the subtle transformation that had occurred over the past week. The unassuming warehouse worker had gradually given way to something else, a strategist, a planner, a man whose quiet confidence came from having faced worse threats than corporate espionage. The board is concerned about the expense, Victoria said. Wallace especially. 3 times the normal security budget plus your team's overtime. Ryan's expression hardened slightly. Is Sophie's safety a budget item? The bluntness of the question hung between them. Victoria set down her coffee cup. Of course not, but I need to justify the expenditure in business terms. Tell them we're protecting the company's most valuable asset, its leadership. Ryan turned back to the plans. And remind Wallace that security expenses are always questioned until the moment they're needed. Then they're priceless. Victoria nodded slowly. I've arranged for Sophie to stay with my sister during the gala. She lives upstate, minimal digital footprint, no connection to Horizon and public records. Good. One less vulnerability to manage. Ryan hesitated, then asked, what about Aiden? My sister can't take him that night. Bring him to my sister's too. The kids get along well and it's the safest option. Victoria's offer came without hesitation, surprising them both with its naturalness. Ryan felt something shift between them, a boundary blurring professional and personal concerns merging. Thank you, that makes things simpler. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. We have a development. Argent Strategic Services just received a significant wire transfer from a shell company in the Caymans. Our financial team traced it back through 3 intermediaries to North Point Technologies. Victoria's expression darkened. James Wheeler. Ryan looked between them. Who's James Wheeler? My former business partner. Victoria said, her voice tight. We co-founded a startup before I joined at Horizon. When we got acquisition offers, I wanted to keep the company independent. He wanted to sell. It got ugly. How ugly, come? Victoria's eyes met Ryan's. He claimed I stole proprietary algorithms he developed, tried to sue me but lost when evidence showed the work was collaborative. He walked away with his share of the company, but none of the patents. He's been building a rival firm ever since, always one step behind Horizon. And now he's hired professional surveillance teams to target you and Sophie. Ryan's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made both women glance at him. That goes beyond corporate rivalry. James always took business personally, Victoria said, but I never thought he'd go this far. Ryan turned back to the security plans, mind recalibrating with this new information. This changes things. Wheeler knows your patterns, your thinking. He's not just some random corporate rival. He knows your vulnerabilities because he worked alongside you. What do we do? The question came from Victoria, but Jennifer was watching just as intently, both women deferring to Ryan's expertise in a situation that had escalated beyond normal corporate security concerns. We changed the plan, all of it. Ryan began pulling down the carefully constructed schedules. If Wheeler knows you, he'll anticipate your standard security approach. So we do something completely unexpected. For the next 2 hours, Ryan rebuilt the security plan from scratch. No standard formations, no predictable rotations, no conventional arrival protocol. By the time he finished, the strategy bore more resemblance to a special forces infiltration than a CEO's appearance at a charity event. This is unorthodox, Jennifer observed, reviewing the final plan. That's the point, Ryan replied. Orthodox is predictable. Predictable is vulnerable. Victoria studied the new approach, eyes narrowing as she processed the tactical shifts. Wallace won't like this. It doesn't follow any of our established protocols. Wallace doesn't need to know the details, Ryan said. Just tell him the plan has been adjusted based on new intelligence. As the day progressed, Ryan briefed the security team on the revised strategy. Most accepted the changes with professional adaptation, but Dominic, recently returned from administrative leave and demoted to a junior position, made his skepticism clear. This isn't how we operate, Dominic objected during the briefing. You're undermining years of established procedure based on what? A hunch about some corporate rival with a grudge. Ryan kept his voice even. Not a hunch, pattern recognition. Wheeler has hired military contractors to surveil Victoria and her daughter. That's not standard corporate espionage. That's targeted intimidation with potential for escalation. And you're the expert on escalation, I suppose. Dominic's tone dripped with sarcasm. The warehouse worker turned security guru overnight. The room went silent. Mike shifted uncomfortably. Frank studied his hands. Everyone felt the tension between the demoted security chief and the newcomer who had effectively replaced him. Ryan met Dominic's gaze steadily. I've seen how quickly surveillance turns to action. I've tracked that progression across multiple theaters of operation. And yes, in those contexts, I am the expert in this room. No boasting, just quiet certainty. Dominic opened his mouth to retort, but Victoria's entrance cut him short. She surveyed the room immediately, sensing the charged atmosphere. Is there a problem, gentlemen? No problem, Ryan said, not breaking eye contact with Dominic, just ensuring everyone understands their role in the revised security plan. Good. Victoria addressed the entire team. I appreciate your flexibility with these changes. Mr. Hayes has my complete confidence in this matter, and I expect each of you to execute his plan precisely. Her gaze lingered on Dominic, without exception. After the meeting, Ryan found himself alone with Victoria in the elevator. Dominic's going to be a problem, he said quietly. I know, but firing him outright would create legal issues after his demotion. HR is watching the situation closely. Victoria sighed. His pride is wounded. He was respected in this company before you arrived. Pride gets people killed in high-risk situations. Victoria studied him. Is that what this is, high-risk? Ryan considered his answer carefully. Wheeler has escalated beyond normal corporate rivalry. He targeted your daughter. He's hired military-grade surveillance. His actions suggest he's willing to cross lines most corporate competitors wouldn't. To what end? What does he hope to achieve? Maybe forcing you to miss the gala, embarrassing you publicly. Maybe something worse. Ryan met her gaze directly. People with wounded pride sometimes want more than just professional victory. They want the other person to suffer like they did. The elevator reached the lobby doors, sliding open to reveal the bustling entrance area. Victoria stepped out, then turned back. You're speaking from experience, aren't you? Ryan gave a slight nod. I've seen what happens when personal grievances mix with professional resources. It rarely ends well without intervention. That evening, Ryan drove to Victoria's sister's house in Westchester County. The property sat at the end of a long driveway, screened from the road by mature trees, naturally defensible, with good visibility in all directions. Ryan approved as he pulled up, Aiden dozing in the back seat after the hour-long drive. Sophie burst from the front door as they arrived, Victoria following more sedately. The girl's excitement at having a friend stay over was palpable. Aiden, Mom said you're sleeping over for 2 whole days. I can show you the treehouse and the creek and the frogs. Aiden, still groggy from his nap, managed a sleepy smile as he climbed out of the car. You have frogs down? Hundreds, well, maybe like 10, but they were really loud. Victoria approached as the children moved toward the house, Sophie already detailing the extensive frog-finding expedition planned for morning. Thank you for bringing him. It makes this easier for Sophie, for all of us, really. Ryan nodded, retrieving Aiden's overnight bag from the trunk. Your sister's place is good, isolated, defensible, limited approach vectors. Victoria's lips curved slushily. Most people would say it's charming or peaceful. Those two, Ryan handed over the bag. I've arranged for a security detail to maintain perimeter surveillance overnight and until we return. They're discreet, experienced. Your sister won't even notice them. She's already complaining about all the precautions. Says I'm being paranoid. Paranoia keeps people alive when the threats are real. Ryan glanced toward the house where the children had disappeared inside. I should go. Early start tomorrow. Victoria hesitated, something unspoken hovering between them. Be careful tomorrow, Ryan. Wheeler knows me, which means he might anticipate some of our countermeasures. That works both ways. You know him too, his habits, his thinking patterns. That gives us an edge. Victoria nodded slowly. He's meticulous, detail-oriented, hates improvisation, always wants control of every variable. Then we make sure he doesn't have it. Ryan turned to go, then paused. Take care of Aiden for me. He acts tough, but strange places sometimes trigger his anxiety. Sophie will keep him so busy he won't have time for anxiety. Victoria smiled. And I'll make sure he's okay. You have my word. The drive back to the city gave Ryan time to think to run through contingencies and weak points in the security plan. Wheeler's involvement changed the calculus significantly. This wasn't some anonymous corporate threat. This was personal, driven by history and grudges and wounded pride. Those elements made prediction, harder risk assessment, more complex. By the time Ryan reached his apartment, a new determination had settled in him. This wasn't just about protecting a CEO and her company anymore. It was about two children asleep in a house in Westchester, about promises made to keep them safe, about preventing the kind of loss that had shattered his own life 3 years ago when Maria died and left Aiden without a mother. The morning of the charity gala dawned clear and cool. Ryan arrived at Horizon before sunrise, reviewing last-minute security adjustments and coordinating with external teams. By noon, everything was in place. Alternate routes, mapped decoy vehicles, prepared communications channels secured. Victoria found him in the Security Operations Center, focused on surveillance feeds from around the hotel venue. She looked different today, not the corporate executive in a power suit, but a woman preparing for an evening event. More vulnerable somehow, despite the added security. "Is everything ready?" she asked, studying the monitors. "As ready as it can be." Ryan turned to face her. "Remember, you don't go anywhere without direct confirmation from me. Not even if someone on the security team tells you to move. We have to assume potential insider threats." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "You think Wheeler has someone inside Horizon?" "I think prudence requires we consider all possibilities. Dominic is disgruntled, has access to our security protocols, and has a history of arrogance regarding external assessment. That makes him vulnerable to manipulation or recruitment. You want to remove him from the security detail?" Ryan nodded. "I requested it this morning. He's been assigned to headquarters monitoring instead. He'll see that as a further insult. Better an insulted security officer than a vulnerable principal." Ryan checked his watch. "The schedule has you departing at 4, arriving at 5 for the pre-event reception. We've adjusted to departure at 3:45 alternate route with a stop at an unrelated location to break any surveillance tail." Victoria nodded, processing the changes. "And James, do we have eyes on him?" "He's under surveillance, currently at his office downtown. We'll know if he moves." Ryan hesitated, then added, "Victoria, if at any point I tell you to abort the appearance, I need you to do it without question or hesitation, even if it means disappointing the charity organizers." Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. "I trust your judgment, Ryan. If you say we pull out, we pull out." The afternoon unfolded according to plan. Victoria departed Horizon through the underground garage, switching vehicles twice before arriving at the hotel through a service entrance. Security teams have reported no surveillance detection, no unusual activity around the perimeter. Everything seemed quiet, too quiet for Ryan's comfort. By 6 o'clock, the charity gala was in full swing. Victoria moved through the crowded ballroom, greeting donors and hospital administrators with practiced charm. Ryan maintained a discreet position nearby, communication earpiece, allowing constant contact with the security team. So far, the revised plan was working perfectly. No sign of Wheeler's surveillance teams, no suspicious activity. At 6:30, Ryan's earpiece crackled with an urgent communication from Mike at the command post. "Ryan, we have a problem. Dominic has gone offline. He's not at the monitoring station, and his credentials were just used to access the secure server room at headquarters." Ryan felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. "Lock down the servers, full containment protocol, and get me eyes on Victoria right now. She's still in the main ballroom east side near the stage. What's happening?" I think this was never about the gala. It was about creating a diversion to access Horizon systems while security focus was elsewhere. Ryan began moving through the crowd toward Victoria. Wheeler doesn't want to embarrass her. He wants to steal from her while she's unprotected. As Ryan approached, Victoria looked up from her conversation, immediately reading the tension in his posture. She excused herself from the hospital director she'd been speaking with and moved to meet Ryan. "We need to leave, now." Ryan kept his voice low but urgent. "Dominic has compromised headquarters security. This event was a diversion." Victoria processed this without visible reaction, years of corporate crisis management kicking in. "The children, security at your sister's, confirms all clear. They're safe." Ryan began guiding her toward their planned extraction route. We need to get back to Horizon immediately. They had almost reached the service corridor when Ryan's instincts flared. A man approaching from their left, moving too directly, too purposefully through the crowd, hand inside his jacket, eyes locked on Victoria. Ryan reacted without conscious thought, pivoting to place himself between Victoria and the approaching threat. Down, he barked, shoving her toward the cover of a nearby pillar as the man withdrew not a weapon, but a small aerosol canister. Security converged from multiple directions, but the man had already sprayed the contents toward them. Not a lethal attack, a diversion. Guests began coughing, alarms spreading through the crowd. In the confusion, Ryan maintained his grip on Victoria's arm, pulling her into the service corridor as hotel security dealt with the growing chaos. Chemical agent, Victoria asked as they hurried down the corridor. Likely just CS gas or pepper spray, enough to create confusion, not meant to cause serious harm. Ryan keyed his radio. Team Alpha, maintain perimeter security. Principal is secure, moving to extraction, point Bravo. They exited through the hotel kitchen, emerging into the loading dock area where their backup vehicle waited. As Ryan helped Victoria into the SUV, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from Jennifer. Ryan, we have confirmation. Dominic used his access to insert a data extraction program into the R&D servers. It's pulling proprietary research files and sending them to an external server. IT is trying to stop it, but he used his legitimate credentials. The system thinks the access is authorized. Ryan started the engine, pulling away from the hotel as police vehicles arrived at the main entrance. Is Dominic still in the building? No. Security footage shows him leaving 20 minutes ago. But Ryan, he's not alone. The facial recognition system identified James Wheeler entering through the loading dock during the shift change. He's in the building. Victoria, listening to Ryan's side of the conversation, went pale. He's at Horizon now. Ryan accelerated, weaving through evening traffic with practiced precision. Jennifer, full lockdown. No one enters or leaves. Activate emergency protocols and have security converge on the R&D floor. We're 15 minutes out. The drive back to Horizon became a tense race against time. Victoria made calls coordinating the emergency response while Ryan focused on getting them there as quickly and safely as possible. Neither spoke of the obvious, that Wheeler and Dominic had orchestrated an elaborate plan to steal Victoria's research while simultaneously humiliating her at a public event. When they arrived at Horizon, the building was in full security lockdown. Emergency lights pulsed in the underground garage as Ryan parked near the executive elevator. Stay behind me, he instructed Victoria as they exited the vehicle. We don't know where they are or if they're armed. The elevator required Victoria's biometric scan to operate during lockdown. As they ascended toward the executive floor, Ryan checked his weapon, a precaution he'd hoped wouldn't be necessary. The R&D lab is on 27, Victoria said as the elevator climbed. The quantum encryption project is what Wheeler would be after. It's years ahead of anything his company has developed. The elevator slowed, approaching the executive floor. Ryan positioned himself to exit first, senses heightened and focused. As the door slid open, he scanned the darkened reception area, illuminated only by emergency lighting. Clear, he murmured, motioning for Victoria to follow as he moved toward the corridor leading to the main office suite. They had almost reached Victoria's office when a figure stepped from the shadows. Dominic, a tablet computer in one hand and what appeared to be a small caliber pistol in the other. Stop right there, Dominic said, voice tight with nervous energy. Both of you. Ryan assessed the situation in fractions of a second. Dominic's stance, his grip on the weapon, the distance between them, potential cover options. You don't want to do this, Dominic. Security is already converging on this floor. There's no way out. There's always a way out for people with leverage. Another voice, smooth and cultured, as James Wheeler emerged from Victoria's office. Unlike Dominic, he projected calm control, the confidence of someone who believed victory was already secured. Hello, Victoria. Surprised to see me? Victoria's expression hardened. Not particularly. Corporate espionage seems right up your alley, James. Always taking shortcuts instead of doing the actual work. Wheeler smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. That's rich coming from you. We both know whose algorithms built the foundation of your precious company. Algorithms I never received proper credit for. The courts disagreed, Victoria replied coolly. Multiple times. Wheeler's smile tightened. Courts can be wrong. History, however, will correctly record who developed the quantum encryption breakthrough. By tomorrow morning, North Point Technologies will announce a major development in the field using research we've legitimately acquired. Ryan maintained his position slightly ahead of Victoria, eyes tracking between Dominic's weapon and Wheeler's position. Theft isn't legitimate acquisition. And who might you be? Wheeler asked, noticing Ryan properly for the first time. Security consultant, Ryan replied simply. Wheeler laughed. Ah, yes, the warehouse worker turned hero. I've read about you. Quite the fairy tale. Former military. I understand. Well, Mr. Hayes, even military training won't help you now. Dominic has been kind enough to grant us access to Victoria's most closely guarded research, and we're almost finished copying it. Ryan noted the tablet in Dominic's hand, likely controlling the data transfer. Why Dominic professional jealousy doesn't explain this level of betrayal. Dominic's jaw tightened. Try financial necessity. Wheeler's paying me enough to disappear afterward. Something Horizon's salary never would have managed. And the surveillance, the attempt at Sophie's school. Ryan kept his voice even, buying time as he listened for approaching security teams through his earpiece. Necessary pressure points, Wheeler said dismissively. I needed Victoria distracted, focused on personal security rather than corporate vulnerabilities. The surveillance teams were never going to harm Sophie, just create enough concern to divide Victoria's attention. Victoria took a step forward, rage breaking through her professional composure. You targeted my daughter as a distraction. Business is business, Victoria. You taught me that when you took sole credit for our joint research. Wheeler checked his watch. The transfer is nearly complete. In 5 minutes, we'll be leaving with the future of quantum encryption in our possession. Ryan heard the faint sound of movement in the stairwell behind them as security teams positioning for entry. He needed to keep Wheeler and Dominic talking, keep their attention focused forward rather than on potential approaches from behind. The building is locked down, Ryan pointed out. All exits secured. How exactly do you plan to leave? Wheeler smiled again, confidence undiminished. Executive helicopter pad, Victoria's private access. Dominic has been kind enough to provide all the necessary codes and clearances. A short flight to a private airfield, then overseas before anyone can stop us. Ryan assessed the angles, the timing. Security would breach the floor within minutes, but that could trigger Dominic to react unpredictably. The weapon in his hand might be small caliber, but at this range it was still lethal. James, Victoria said, her voice suddenly softer, almost conciliatory. This isn't you. Corporate espionage threatening children. You were better than this once. Wheeler's expression flickered, a momentary uncertainty crossing his features. You left me no choice. You took everything, the company, the patents, and the recognition. Do you know what it's like watching from the sidelines as you receive accolades for work we did together? Then let's talk about proper recognition, Victoria continued. A joint research partnership. Public acknowledgement of your contributions to the original algorithms. There are better solutions than this. Ryan recognized what Victoria was doing, creating a connection, humanizing herself to Wheeler, giving him a potential off-ramp from the escalating situation. It was well executed, the kind of negotiation tactic that might work with a rational actor driven by legitimate grievances. But Ryan had seen the coldness in Wheeler's eyes, the calculation behind his actions. This wasn't just about recognition or even financial gain. This was about power, about winning, about making Victoria feel the helplessness he had experienced. Dominic shifted nervously, glancing at Wheeler. The transfer's complete. We need to move. Wheeler nodded, focus returning. Victoria, I'm afraid negotiation time is long past. We'll be taking the research and leaving now. Mr. Hayes, I suggest you step aside. Dominic seems rather tense and accidents happen. The security teams were in position now. Ryan could hear the soft communications through his earpiece. But a direct breach risked escalation, potential harm to Victoria if Dominic panicked. A different approach was needed. Before you go, Ryan said calmly, you should know the quantum encryption research you're stealing is worthless without the authentication keys stored in Victoria's personal server. Separate system, separate security protocols. A calculated bluff based on standard security practices for high-value intellectual property. Wheeler frowned, glancing at Dominic. Is this true? Dominic hesitated. I don't know. My access was limited to the R&D servers. Ryan pressed the advantage. The research is deliberately segmented. What you have is incomplete, useless, without the authentication framework. He turned slightly toward Victoria. Isn't that right? Victoria didn't miss a beat. Of course, basic security protocol for all our most sensitive research. What you're stealing is essentially just advanced documentation without the operational keys. Doubt crept into Wheeler's expression. The certainty of victory began to waver. You're lying, trying to buy time. Maybe, Ryan acknowledged, or maybe you're about to flee the country with incomplete research that will identify you as a thief but provide no actual competitive advantage. Quite a risk to take. Wheeler's composure cracked further. Dominic, you said the entire project was on the R&D servers. That's what I was told. Dominic protested, attention shifting from Ryan and Victoria to Wheeler. Security protocols aren't my department. In that moment of divided attention, Ryan made his move. A swift, precise strike to Dominic's wrist sent the weapon clattering to the floor. A second movement practiced countless times in training, and Dominic was on his knees, arm locked behind him in Ryan's grip. Wheeler lunged for the fallen gun, but Victoria was faster. A sharp kick sent it spinning under a nearby credenza out of reach. Security teams burst through the stairwell door, weapons drawn, surrounding Wheeler before he could react further. James Wheeler, you're being detained for corporate espionage, breaking and entering, and conspiracy, announced the lead security officer, securing Wheeler's hands behind his back. As additional officers took custody of Dominic, Ryan released his hold and moved to Victoria's side. Are you all right? She nodded, professional composure returning, even as adrenaline still coursed through her system. Yes, thank you. Then as the security team led Wheeler and Dominic away, she added quietly, was that true about the authentication keys? Ryan allowed himself a small smile. Standard security protocol for high-value intellectual property seemed like a reasonable bluff. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, then she laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her features. You know, we actually do segment the research that way. I implemented the protocol after James left the company. I just never thought we'd need it quite like this. The next hours passed in a blur of police statements, systems security, verifications, and crisis management. By midnight, the immediate threat had been contained. Wheeler and Dominic were in police custody, the stolen data recovered, and emergency security protocols implemented throughout Horizon systems. Victoria found Ryan in the Security Operations Center coordinating the final verification processes with IT. The room had the controlled chaos of a post-crisis environment, multiple teams working simultaneously, information flowing through various channels, everyone slightly wired from adrenaline and caffeine. The police say they found evidence on Wheeler's devices linking him to the surveillance teams and the incident at Sophie's school, Victoria said, joining Ryan at the main console. They're building a comprehensive case. Corporate espionage, conspiracy, reckless endangerment of a minor. His legal problems are just beginning. Ryan nodded, signing off on a final security verification report. And Dominic, cooperating fully, trying to minimize his own exposure. Claims Wheeler approached him after his demotion played on his resentment and financial concerns. Victoria's expression hardened. No excuse, but at least we understand the vulnerability Wheeler exploited. There are always vulnerabilities, Ryan said. The key is recognizing and addressing them before they are exploited. He stood, fatigue finally registering after hours of high alert focus. We should get to the children. They'll be wondering what happened. Victoria nodded, her own exhaustion evident in the slight slump of her shoulders. I've arranged for a company helicopter, faster than driving at this point, and I don't think either of us should be behind the wheel right now. The night air was cool and clear as they lifted off from Horizon's rooftop helipad. The city spread below them, a tapestry of lights against the darkness. Ryan watched the urban grid give way to suburban patterns, then to the scattered lights of Westchester County's more rural landscape. Beside him, Victoria gazed out at the same view, lost in thought. I never thanked you properly, she said finally, voice barely audible over the helicopter's hum. Not just for tonight, but for everything since the mall. You've protected Sophie, Horizon, me, all while being treated with suspicion and doubt by people who should have recognized your value immediately. Ryan kept his eyes on the horizon. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, that's part of why you deserve it. Victoria turned to face him fully. You could have walked away at any point. Gone back to being invisible, which is clearly what you preferred before all this happened. Instead, you stepped into a spotlight you never wanted because it was the right thing to do. Ryan considered her words, feeling the truth in them. He had chosen visibility over safety action, over anonymity. Not for recognition or reward, but because some threats couldn't be ignored, some people couldn't be abandoned to face danger alone. The invisible path was easier, he acknowledged, but not always right. The helicopter began its descent toward the clearing near Victoria's sister's property. Lights burned in the windows of the house, warm against the darkness. What happens now? Victoria asked the question, encompassing far more than just the immediate future. Ryan watched the ground approach. We tell the children we're okay. We get some rest. And tomorrow we start rebuilding the security protocols with what we've learned. And after that, when the immediate crisis is past, there was something in Victoria's voice, a question beneath the question, a door being cautiously opened. Ryan met her gaze directly. I protect what matters. That hasn't changed. Dawn was breaking as they finally left Victoria's sister's house, children secured in the back seat of the car, both still in pajamas and drowsy from an interrupted night's sleep. The helicopter had returned to the city, leaving them to drive back together in the quiet morning light. Sophie and Aiden had greeted their arrival with sleepy confusion, aware something important had happened, but unclear on the details. Victoria had explained simply that some problems at work had needed solving, and now everything was okay. The children had accepted this with the easy faith of the young, more concerned with whether they could still search for frogs in the morning than with corporate espionage and security breaches. As they drove through the awakening countryside, Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror. Sophie and Aiden had already fallen back asleep, heads tilted together, Sophie's golden hair mixing with Aiden's darker curls. Two children from different worlds finding common ground in the simple pleasure of friendship. Beside him, Victoria watched the passing landscape, the first rays of sunlight touching her face. The CEO was gone for the moment. No phone calls, no emails, no crisis management. Just a mother tired but content watching her child sleep peacefully after danger had passed. The board is meeting this afternoon, she said softly, not wanting to wake the children. Emergency session to discuss security protocols and leadership. Will there be fallout from Wheeler's infiltration? Victoria nodded slightly. Inevitably. Questions about our security procedures, about how Dominic was able to assist an outside threat. Wallace will be particularly vocal, I imagine. And you'll handle it like you handle everything else, Ryan said with quiet certainty, with clarity and purpose. A small smile touched Victoria's lips. Is that how you see me, clear and purposeful? Among other things. Ryan kept his eyes on the road but felt her gaze on him. What other things? Ryan considered his answer carefully. Determined, adaptable, willing to admit when you're wrong and change course accordingly. Not everyone can do that, especially from a position of power. Victoria was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. You see more than most people. Occupational hazard, Ryan replied, the hint of a smile softening his features. Noticing things others miss. They drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the children sleeping peacefully behind them, the morning light strengthening across the landscape. A new day after a night of crisis and resolution. Ryan, Victoria said finally, I'd like to create a new division at Horizon. Integrated security, physical, digital personnel. Not just guards and cameras, but comprehensive threat assessment and protection. The kind of approach you've been advocating since you arrived. Ryan glanced at her, sensing there was more to the proposal. I'd like you to lead it, she continued. Director-level position reporting directly to me. Full autonomy to build the team and protocols as you see fit. The offer hung between them, weighty with implication. Not just a job, but a commitment. A visible, permanent role that would pull Ryan fully from the shadows into the corporate light. It would mean no more hiding, Ryan said quietly. No more invisibility. Is that still what you want? To be invisible? Victoria's question was gentle but direct. Ryan thought about the past weeks, the challenges faced, the threats overcome, the skills reawakened and repurposed. He thought about Aiden's pride in his father's work, about the sense of purpose that had returned after years of deliberate anonymity. No, he said finally, I don't think it is. Victoria smiled relief and something more complex warming her expression. Good, because I've grown rather accustomed to seeing you, Ryan Hayes. I'd hate to lose sight of you now. The words carried multiple meanings, layers of professional appreciation and personal connection intertwining. Ryan felt something shift inside him, a wall lowering, a door opening to possibilities he'd closed off years ago after Maria's death. "Then I accept," he said simply, "on one condition, which is flexible hours. Aiden needs stability routine. School pickup, homework time, weekends together. That's non-negotiable." Victoria's smile widened. "Absolutely. In fact, I was thinking of implementing a company-wide family-friendly scheduling policy. Perhaps you and I could develop it together as parents who understand the challenges firsthand." As they approached the city skyline rising against the morning sky, Ryan felt a certainty settle in him. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Corporate politics, security challenges, the delicate balance of professional and personal boundaries. But for the first time in years, he was moving towards something rather than away, building rather than hiding. Beside him, Victoria made a quick call to Jennifer, rescheduling morning meetings to allow for rest after the night's events. Her efficiency was seamless, her authority clear, even in brief instructions. Yet there was a new softness in her manner, a balance of strength and humanity that Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to. In the back seat, Aiden stirred, blinking sleepily. "Dad, are we home yet?" "Almost, Bud. Just crossing the bridge now." Aiden nodded, then looked at the still sleeping Sophie beside him. "Can Sophie come over sometime? To our place. I want to show her my dinosaur collection." Ryan met Victoria's gaze, a question in his eyes. She smiled the gesture, reaching all the way to her eyes this time. "I think that would be wonderful," she said. "Maybe this weekend." "Yeah." Ryan agreed, something warm unfurling in his chest. This weekend would be perfect. The city embraced them as they crossed the bridge, morning sun glinting off glass towers and turning the East River to molten gold. Horizon's headquarters rose in the distance, its distinctive silhouette standing proud against the skyline. No longer just a workplace, but a nexus of new beginnings, of paths converging after long separation. Ryan Hayes, once invisible, now stood at the intersection of past and future, of duty and possibility. The Protector had found something worth protecting beyond mere survival: connection, purpose, and the chance to build rather than simply endure. As Victoria's hand briefly touched his on the center console, a gesture of shared understanding and possibility, Ryan knew with certainty that some journeys weren't meant to be walked alone. Some wounds healed better in the light than in darkness. And sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't facing danger. It was facing life with all its uncertainties and promises, its risks and rewards. The invisible man had become visible at last. And in that visibility, he had found not vulnerability, but strength. Not exposure, but connection. Not an ending, but a beginning. The morning light strengthened, illuminating the path ahead, not a retreat into shadows, but an advance into daylight, side by side with those who had learned to truly see him.